they addressed a lot of positions there, and some help at receivers, some help at running back, tight end. I mentioned the coaching staff and the offensive line. So I do feel like Bryce Young is certainly in a better place, but this is a massive, massive year for him. And maybe we look back at this kind of like we did with Trevor Lawrence, right? Even though Trevor Lawrence, I'm a fan of Trevor Lawrence, but I don't feel like he's lived up to the expectations, fair or not, that were placed on him coming out of college, given what we saw at Clemson. But we may just look at year one for Bryce Young and go,
Yep. So just lost Nick's sound right quick, but talking about Carolina Panthers and Bryce Young, I mentioned coming into the season last year, I was a big Bryce Young supporter. As a matter of fact, I was so much of a Bryce Young supporter that I bought a ticket for Frank Reich to win Coach of the Year. Right?
Did you?
17-1 ticket for Frank Reich to win Coach of the Year. Nick, this is not a game. Sitting here watching week one of preseason, I just tore the ticket up because I was like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. You got a 5'5" quarterback, no offensive line, yet you sending 5 people out into the route. Who's supposed to attack the 5'2" quarterback? So I tore the ticket up, and he didn't even make it. Now, don't get me wrong. David Tepper is challenging for the worst owner in pro sports. You as a Commander fan, you've been there. Me as a Knick fan, I know those streets well. Now, with that being said, Tepper is in the lead right now. But you do see that this season, it seems like some of the right moves are being made. They bring in Dave Canales, and Dave Canales has had the Midas touch with some of these quarterbacks. So we got to feel good about Young coming into this year yet again. That's where I stand. I'm not buying no Dave Canales Coach of the Year tickets right now, but I do think that we should see some improvement from Bryce Young.
Yeah, I would definitely stay away from any props with him either. I mean, you think back last year, he was sacked 62 times for 477 yards lost. I mean, that is insane. That's going back to not Derek Carr, David Carr, his brother, back in that expansion year with the Texans where he was the number 1 overall pick, and then offensive line couldn't do a damn thing for him. But I mean, the numbers are low for Bryce Young, right? We're talking 3,200 passing yards. It's minus 110 both ways there. His passing touchdowns are only 18.5. That's one spot where I'd at least say if you have confidence in this offense, given the weapons you've added, given the offensive line improvement, and listen, giving a head coach specifically, you mentioned Canales. I mean, he took a very similar approach that he wants to do with Bryce Young that he did with Baker Mayfield, getting the ball out quick, right? 2.5 seconds or less, right? You want to have that Tua type of vibe where it's get the ball out really, really fast, and that's where Bryce Young was actually at his best. He averaged 2.91 seconds per throw last season, but when he was at 2.5 seconds or less, he completed 66% of his passes. So Bryce Young getting the ball out quickly, much more successful. So if that's going to be the approach, if you told me, hey, Nick, I give you a free bet right now, and you got to take one season-long prop bet on Bryce Young, what would it be? It would be over 18.5 passing touchdowns, just given what the coaching staff's mindset is with Bryce Young in year 2.
Yeah, if he can't get to 20 touchdown passes this season right here with some of the upgrades they made on offense, then they may have made a bad pick with the first pick of that draft that they traded up to get. So I do think there's reason to be optimistic for Bryce Young this year. Like I said, I've been a supporter, and getting that ball out quickly is so critical. And they got some pieces around that can do that now. Getting a running game could be something that they need to look into. I know a lot of people in fantasy circles are interested in Brooks. I'm not so sure on that yet. But listen, Carolina plays in a division where they can compete. It's not like, you don't have no world beaters in the NFC South. They were competing in the division for a little bit last year until they, kind of just fell apart. So I think the Panthers can give the Falcons and the Buccaneers a bit of a run in that division. I think it's going to be a close call this year in the NFC South.
You mentioned fantasy. You're obviously in that world too, just not the sports betting world as well. Like if I told you, Corey, you got to pick one guy in Carolina that you have to draft in fantasy that you think is going to have the best season, who would that be for you?
That's a tough one right there. Now, one thing I will say is last year I was in last year on Adam Thielen.
That was my first thought. Yeah.
I always like a veteran wide receiver with a rookie quarterback, a la Reggie Wayne in Andrew Luck's rookie year when he put up phenomenal numbers. This year, I would take a look at Keenan Allen with Caleb Williams, veteran receiver with a young quarterback. But Jonathan Brooks, who is hurt now, was interesting to me. But I got to look at Deontay Johnson. I think Deontay Johnson can be somebody who is interesting. And also, I've seen Xavier Legette up close and personal, and he is a freak athlete. And I think he is somebody that I would be willing to take a late round flyer on. So I want to dig into that passing game more so than that rushing attack.
If you do look back on last year, because we were kind of talking about this before you jumped on with us, like what, I know it's going to be multiple things to this answer, but what did go wrong last year? Like, where would you kind of divvy up the blame and what they can learn from as an organization from how everything went year one, specifically with Bryce Young?
Well, I just think it was a miscast scenario when it comes to the coach and the quarterback. I feel like Frank Reich, for whatever reason, just did not mesh the best with Bryce Young. It seemed like they tried to force Bryce to play Frank Reich's offense as opposed to what Dave Canales has said, where they want to mold an offense around Bryce's best skill set. I think one of the biggest and most telling things that they said about Bryce during last year was that they were not necessarily big fans of his footwork, but they felt like that could be something that they waited until the first offseason to really fix. And you saw how it kind of reared its ugly head for him during the rookie season and how there was happy feet moments. There were times where he maybe kind of ran himself into sacks a year ago. And honestly, it really killed his confidence. And I think from that perspective, there were very many things that went wrong as well. There were also the reports about potential, backroom, for lack of a better term, snitching when it comes to the assistant coaches and things of that nature, and allegations of basically people going to ownership and saying that there were certain things about certain coaches that weren't being done correctly. And for whatever reason, Frank Reich, when he was up there, he took the podium on January the 28th, and he had, a couple of gray hairs and a couple of dark hairs. He aged like a two-term president in about 8 months when the way that he looked after he took the podium for the last time with the Panthers as the head coach. And for whatever reason, it just didn't seem like he was 100%, all in terms of the way that that it looked. And for whatever reason, I just felt like that might have been just the wrong hire in terms of that. And I think that put the Panthers very much right behind the 8 ball. And you feel like now that with Canales and a bit of a different energy, a different positivity, and something that a couple of veterans have spoken to when it comes to, like Russell Okung has talked about this, and also Baker Mayfield has talked about this as well during this offseason. Both guys talk about the fact that Dave Canales' energy might be a little off-putting the first time you hear it and see it because it's so effusive, and in other people it might seem forced, but he's a real genuine dude, and I think he's exactly what Bryce needs in order to try and, get his career back going. This might almost feel, guys, like Bryce Young's rookie year in a way because so much about last year seemed like it was somewhat off kilter by the time he actually got himself on the field.